When you think of Alabama wealth, you picture college football dynasties and southern planters. But the real money wasn't made in the fields. It was made by the immigrant merchants who financed them. We are talking about highly exclusive, tightly knit Jewish dynasties that escaped European persecution to monopolize the Deep South's retail, real estate, and global commodities. Today, we count down the richest Jewish families in Alabama. Number 6. The Schiffman and Goldsmith Families, the Huntsville Vanguard. To truly comprehend the monumental origin of Jewish wealth and dynastic power within the borders of the Deep South, you have to fundamentally understand the sheer, unadulterated physical grit of the 19th century itinerant peddler. When determined immigrants like Isaac Schiffman first arrived in America from the distant regions of Central Europe, they simply did not have the luxurious advantage of comfortable Manhattan office spaces or established corporate infrastructure. Instead, they deliberately traveled deep into the agrarian South, venturing into a highly complex region that was incredibly land-rich, but simultaneously severely infrastructure poor. Carrying massive, unwieldy packs that weighed upwards of 100 pounds, these exceptionally resilient men continuously walked the dusty, incredibly dangerous rural roads of Alabama. They essentially served as highly mobile, human-powered department stores. They tirelessly sold the absolute necessities of life, crucial tools, woven textiles, and vital medicines, directly to highly isolated farming communities that otherwise had no access to global markets. Eventually, after years of grueling labor and relentless saving, Schiffman and the deeply intertwined Goldsmith family successfully acquired enough liquid capital to finally park their heavy wagons. They boldly established a massive, permanent brick-and-mortar mercantile hub centrally located in Huntsville. Through this monumental transition, they effectively evolved from wandering salesmen into the absolute, undisputed retail kings of northern Alabama. The visionary Schiffman and Goldsmith dynasties recognized incredibly early on that merely selling physical goods is ultimately a linear business, but commanding and controlling capital is a truly exponential one. They fiercely protected their rapidly accumulating wealth by executing an absolute masterclass in highly aggressive asset diversification. They intelligently funneled the massive, compounding cash flows generated by their retail dry goods stores directly into hard, untouchable physical assets. They systematically purchased sweeping, highly valuable tracts of agricultural farmland, strategically acquired prime urban commercial rental properties, and quietly built a highly sophisticated stock portfolio. Long before the modern, highly convenient era of index funds, this powerful family was quietly purchasing massive, highly lucrative equity stakes in the rapidly expanding American railroad networks, heavily investing in regional mining operations, and acquiring significant shares in the newly formed municipal utility companies that literally powered the industrialization of the South. Their ultimate, undeniable power move was successfully transitioning from successful local merchants into highly sophisticated, localized, high-stakes venture capitalists. The towering physical monument to this historic transition is the historic Ayer Schiffman Building, an imposing architectural fortress located precisely in downtown Huntsville. From this highly secure headquarters, the powerful family completely stopped merely selling basic supplies to the city and aggressively began financing the development of the city itself. In a historically cash-poor region where reliable access to credit was quite literally a matter of life and death for struggling farmers and ambitious real estate developers, the Schiffman Goldsmith Syndicate utilized their incredibly deep financial connections to elite Baltimore and New York banks to effectively act as a highly localized private Federal Reserve. They absolutely controlled the liquidity of Huntsville. The modern public often looks back at the historical archetype of the Jewish peddler and mistakenly visualizes a poor, desperate wanderer struggling just to survive. This is a fatal, completely inaccurate misunderstanding of frontier economics. These pioneering men were absolutely not beggars. They were highly mobile, hyper-intelligent market researchers. They expertly mapped the economic blind spots of the Deep South, clearly identified exactly where capital was most desperately needed by the population, and systematically established ironclad geographic monopolies that successfully compounded into massive, multi-generational fortunes. Number 5. The Pizitz family, the retail monopolists. At the dawn of the 20th century, Birmingham, Alabama was absolutely not a quiet, sleepy southern town. It was a roaring, incredibly violent industrial furnace widely known as the Magic City, experiencing a massive, unprecedented population explosion heavily fueled by the aggressive extraction of iron ore, coal, and limestone. Louis Pizitz, a brilliant, highly educated Polish immigrant who had originally studied in Europe to become a rabbi, arrived in America in 1889 with absolutely nothing to his name. By utilizing sheer, unstoppable force of will, he painstakingly saved $750 and bravely moved to the chaotic environment of Birmingham to rent a tiny, highly modest $75 a month storefront. He officially founded the Louis Pizitz Dry Goods Company, which he rapidly and aggressively expanded into an absolute retail leviathan that dominated the landscape. At its absolute historical peak, the staggering Pizitz empire boasted an incredible 12-store regional monopoly, securely anchored by a colossal, 7-story architectural masterpiece situated right in the beating heart of downtown Birmingham. Pizitz did not merely protect his massive retail empire with highly complex, intricate legal structures. He deeply protected his wealth by engineering an unbreakable, fiercely loyal, emotional monopoly over his entire consumer base. During the incredibly brutal, deeply violent coal miner strikes that frequently and severely paralyzed Alabama's highly volatile industrial economy, thousands of working-class families faced the terrifying prospect of outright starvation. Louis Pizitz didn't just offer empty public sympathy, he aggressively weaponized his massive logistics network, actively sending entire fleets of heavy trucks heavily loaded with completely free food and essential clothing directly to the desperate striking miners' camps. Furthermore, during the devastating, catastrophic depths of the Great Depression, when traditional, highly established banks collapsed overnight and ruthlessly foreclosed on thousands of families, Pizitz quietly forgave crushing debts and generously extended massive, unprecedented lines of flexible store credit. He literally fed his vulnerable customers when they were actively starving, absolutely guaranteeing a level of fierce, deeply entrenched, multi-generational brand loyalty that absolutely no national corporate competitor could ever possibly hope to disrupt or steal. While Louis Pizitz successfully built the sprawling operational machine of the business, the ultimate billionaire-level financial power move firmly belonged to his intelligent heirs, heavily operating through the highly structured Pizitz Management Group. In 1986, accurately recognizing that the golden era of the independent, family-owned regional department store was rapidly coming to a permanent close, the visionary family successfully orchestrated the brilliant, highly lucrative sale of the Pizitz retail operations directly to the massive McRae's corporate chain. However, they expertly executed a vital, highly sophisticated legal carve-out in the contract. They sold the specific brand name and the physical inventory, but they absolutely kept the actual physical dirt. The Pizitz family completely retained the absolute ownership of the massive prime commercial real estate buildings scattered across the entire state of Alabama, immediately forcing the brand new corporate owners to pay them exorbitant, entirely never-ending monthly rent. The general public typically looks at massive retailers as mere, simple merchants of fast fashion and cheap home goods. They incorrectly view these giant stores as highly disposable, purely transactional physical locations. The brilliant Pizitz family definitively proved that a massive department store can completely transcend standard retail economics and become an undeniable, highly respected institutional civic pillar. They didn't just efficiently capture the valuable discretionary spending of Alabama's working class. They permanently captured the deep psychological and emotional loyalty of the entire state, absolutely ensuring their massive physical properties were forever treated as untouchable, highly lucrative civic monuments. Number 4. The Sterne family, the invisible underwriters. While the incredibly elite, highly connected power brokers operating in New York City had the massive capital of Wall Street to deeply finance their towering glass skyscrapers and vast industrial monopolies, the American South was a completely capital-starved, desolate wasteland in the difficult decades immediately following Reconstruction. M.H. Sterne clearly recognized this massive, glaring geographical inefficiency in the national markets. In 1910, he officially co-founded the firm Sterne, Agee and Leach, located in Birmingham, Alabama. He absolutely did not build a lucrative business by simply selling standard physical goods to consumers. He successfully built one of the oldest, most respected, and vastly largest privately owned investment banking and powerful brokerage firms in the entire southeast region of the United States. The deeply intelligent Sterne family made their massive, staggering fortune by actively becoming the absolutely indispensable financial pipeline that efficiently pumped vital, highly necessary northern capital directly into the desperate veins of the developing southern economy. Operating a highly sophisticated investment bank in the depths of the Deep South explicitly required expertly navigating the immense, highly intimidating shadow of the massive northern financial leviathans, powerful institutions exactly like J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs. The Sterne family fiercely protected their highly lucrative, incredibly specialized niche by focusing almost exclusively on a specific market that the arrogant northern banks completely deemed far too small, far too highly complex, or far too incredibly risky: Southern municipal bonds and highly localized regional corporate debt. The massive, disconnected banks operating in Manhattan had absolutely no idea how to accurately price the fundamental risk of a very small, incredibly rural waterboard operating in the backwoods of Alabama. Sterne AG massively survived and overwhelmingly thrived precisely because they possessed highly accurate, deeply hyper-local intelligence. They personally knew the local mayors. They intimately understood the exact, highly specific tax base of the regional counties, and they accurately and flawlessly priced the financial risk that wealthy outsiders completely, foolishly ignored. The absolute ultimate test of this impenetrable financial fortress dramatically occurred during the catastrophic, incredibly destructive market collapse of the 1930s. When the terrifying Great Depression forcefully triggered a massive, unstoppable tidal wave of severe municipal defaults, thousands of established banks across the entire United States were utterly, permanently annihilated overnight. Sterne AG brilliantly survived the devastating financial carnage through sheer, totally uncompromising mathematical discipline and incredibly deep, highly conservative liquidity management. They powerfully emerged from the ashes of the Depression, firmly established as the absolute undisputed, highly powerful financial gatekeepers for all massive Southern infrastructure projects. If a growing Alabama city desperately wanted to build a massive new highway system, successfully construct a sprawling, highly modern public school district, or safely lay down a highly advanced modern electrical grid, they fundamentally had to actively seek the crucial financial blessing and the highly specialized underwriting expertise of the powerful Sterne family. When the general public deeply contemplates the origins of massive Southern wealth, they almost exclusively visualize vast, highly profitable agricultural plantations, incredibly heavy timber operations, or massive commercial real estate developers dominating the landscape. The brilliant Sterne family permanently and completely shattered that outdated stereotype, definitively proving that the ultimate, absolute, uncompromising power in a rapidly developing economy firmly lies in the quiet, highly calculated hands of the underwriter. They absolutely didn't have to hire the sweating construction crews or physically pour the heavy concrete themselves. They simply collected massive, entirely guaranteed percentage fees for legally and financially allowing the vital roads to be built in the very first place. They were the highly lucrative, entirely invisible architects of the state. Number 3. The Hess and Abrams families, the Parisian aristocracy. True, multi-generational retail wealth is absolutely not generated by simply selling cheap, disposable goods to the massive general public. It is systematically generated by carefully capturing the highly lucrative discretionary income of the deeply aspirational upper middle class. Emil Hess and Hal Abrams understood this highly complex consumer psychology perfectly and flawlessly. They brilliantly took the helm of Parisian, originally operating as merely a single, well-regarded local department store located in Birmingham, and highly aggressively transformed it into a massive 40-store retail leviathan that completely and absolutely dominated the wealthy regions of the Sun Belt. They meticulously curated highly exclusive, incredibly premium apparel brands, and beautifully presented them in a highly curated physical environment that loudly screamed accessible luxury, successfully turning the simple act of standard shopping into a highly elevated, incredibly high-status cultural event. The visionary Hess and Abrams families effectively protected their massive, sprawling retail empire by deeply digging a totally impenetrable, highly effective competitive moat widely known throughout the industry as the Parisian Way. While massive, highly capitalized national behemoths, exactly like Macy's and Sears, fought incredibly bloody, margin-destroying, race-to-the-bottom price wars, Parisian completely and utterly refused to ever compete on simple price. Instead, they fiercely competed on incredibly frictionless, highly luxurious convenience. They generously offered proprietary, entirely interest-free store credit accounts directly to their most loyal, highest-spending top clients. Far more importantly, they radically instituted an absolutely unconditional, totally no questions asked, highly controversial return policy. If a demanding customer brought back a heavily worn, deeply used shirt an incredible 5 years after originally purchasing it, completely without a physical receipt, the store happily refunded them with a warm, highly accommodating smile. They brilliantly conditioned their massive consumer base to feel so incredibly, deeply valued that simply shopping anywhere else in the entire country physically felt like a personal insult. The absolute ultimate masterpiece of the Hess and Abrams dynasty was their impeccable, nearly clairvoyant economic market timing. In the highly pivotal year of 1996, the entire global retail industry was rapidly, violently consolidating, and the very faint, early, highly disruptive tremors of the internet e-commerce revolution were just beginning to severely shake the very physical foundation of traditional physical retail. Accurately recognizing that the incredibly lucrative golden era of the highly dominant regional department store was rapidly cresting, they perfectly executed the absolute ultimate corporate exit. They incredibly sold the entire, massive Parisian enterprise directly to profits, which later became a highly valuable part of the massive Saks Incorporated empire, for a truly staggering, deeply impressive sum of roughly $250 million. They successfully extracted a massive $250 million in pure, highly liquid capital right before the internet began systematically, ruthlessly annihilating traditional brick-and-mortar retail operations worldwide. The general public, and even many highly experienced amateur business owners, routinely view excessive, highly accommodating customer service and totally unconditional return policies as a highly dangerous, massive money-losing operational cost. The brilliant Hess and Abrams families definitively proved that this highly standard assumption is completely, utterly false. They successfully, incredibly weaponized customer service itself. By happily accepting deeply fraudulent or highly absurd merchandise returns at a very slight, incredibly temporary financial loss, they successfully built an unbreakable, highly lucrative emotional monopoly over their consumers. The highly satisfied customer deeply felt an incredibly profound psychological debt directly to the luxury brand, virtually completely guaranteeing they would return shortly and happily spend 10 times the specific value of the original refunded item. It was a brilliant, highly calculated, incredibly sophisticated marketing acquisition cost, beautifully disguised as simple, warm Southern hospitality. Number 2. The Aronov family. The concrete landlords. Following the highly dramatic conclusion of World War II, the entire American physical landscape underwent the absolute most radical, incredibly massive geographical transformation in its entire documented history. The highly impactful implementation of the GI Bill and the massive, unstoppable explosion of the personal automobile successfully allowed millions of young families to quickly flee the highly dense, incredibly crowded urban cities directly for the highly sprawling, beautifully, newly paved idyllic suburbs. Aaron Aronov officially founded Aronov Realty located in Montgomery, Alabama, in the year 1952. He originally started his business by actively building simple, highly affordable single-family homes in an attempt to capture this massively booming demographic shift. However, his true, highly visionary, deeply multi-billion-dollar genius was rapidly realizing that all these millions of newly minted, highly optimistic suburbanites were inevitably going to deeply need a highly centralized, highly convenient place to spend all their rapidly growing disposable money. He violently, aggressively pivoted away from standard residential housing directly into highly lucrative commercial real estate, completely pioneering the massive development of the very first sprawling, highly lucrative shopping centers located in the state of Alabama. Standard real estate developers who simply build massive physical properties and immediately, quickly sell them for a rapid, highly taxed quick profit are essentially playing a very short-term, highly foolish game. The brilliant Aronov family fiercely protected their incredibly astronomical, truly massive wealth by absolutely, completely refusing to ever sell. They successfully built the absolutely largest privately owned, highly dominant real estate development company in the entire Southeast region by systematically, ruthlessly hoarding incredibly valuable commercial dirt. They aggressively constructed massive, highly lucrative, enclosed shopping malls, seemingly endless, highly profitable strip centers, and sprawling multifamily residential complexes, deliberately holding the highly valuable physical assets entirely on their own corporate balance sheet for many decades, successfully allowing the underlying, highly coveted land value to beautifully compound straight into the financial stratosphere while consistently collecting massive monthly rent checks. The absolute, entirely undeniable power move of the massive Aronov dynasty is their total, deeply uncompromising, highly complex vertical integration. Aronov Realty absolutely does not just simply build the massive physical property and foolishly walk away. They aggressively lease it, they highly meticulously manage it, they brilliantly market it, and they officially act as the highly compensated primary brokers. They brilliantly engineered a completely sealed, totally closed-loop, highly efficient financial ecosystem, where absolutely every single highly valuable dollar generated by the entire life cycle of a massive commercial property smoothly flows directly back into the highly protected family holding company. By efficiently managing all the massive assets entirely in-house, they completely and totally eliminate the massive, highly expensive management fees normally, routinely siphoned off by external third-party management firms, successfully maximizing the sheer, truly incredible cash flow efficiency of their sprawling empire. When the standard, completely average citizen slowly drives past a massive, highly glittering suburban shopping mall, they simply look at the giant corporate logos brightly plastered on the side of the massive building, massive corporations like Best Buy, Target, and Barnes & Noble, and they completely, totally incorrectly assume that those famous retail brands are the specific ones holding the absolute ultimate power. The brilliant Aronov family definitively, entirely proves that those highly famous brands are absolutely nothing more than highly vulnerable, incredibly high-paying, completely temporary tenants. The true, entirely untouchable, highly secretive dynastic wealth firmly belongs to the incredibly quiet, highly powerful family that completely owns the massive concrete box, ruthlessly charging exorbitant, completely guaranteed rent regardless of whether the retail stores trapped inside are happily hitting their quarterly sales targets or slowly, painfully going bankrupt. Number 1. The Lehman family, the global titans. To truly witness the monumental, incredibly historic genesis of the absolute richest, most powerful, and highly globally influential Jewish family to ever successfully emerge from the state of Alabama, you must travel completely back in time to the year 1844. A highly ambitious 23-year-old immigrant named Henry Lehman, the determined son of a highly resilient Jewish cattle merchant hailing from the extremely small, deeply rural village of Rimpar, Bavaria, bravely arrived in the developing city of Montgomery, Alabama. He quietly opened a highly tiny, completely unassuming, very simple wooden dry goods store. He was very soon proudly joined by his intelligent brothers Emmanuel and Mayer, and together they formally formed the massive institution known as Lehman Brothers in the year 1850. At this specific point in history, the entire massive economic engine of the state of Alabama was completely, entirely dependent on the highly brutal, deeply unforgiving, entirely slave-driven Cotton Kingdom. The incredibly powerful Southern planters were incredibly wealthy in highly valuable land and exploited labor, but they were simultaneously severely, terribly starved of vital, desperately needed liquid cash. The incredibly highly intelligent Lehman Brothers quickly recognized this massive, glaring economic friction. They brilliantly began securely accepting raw, highly valuable physical cotton as direct, highly acceptable payment for their crucial tools, essential seeds, and vital clothing. They incredibly quickly realized a deeply profound, highly lucrative truth. Physically trading the highly valuable cotton itself directly on the highly volatile global market was absolutely, astronomically more lucrative than simply selling the basic, low-margin dry goods. As their massive, sprawling cotton brokerage operation rapidly exploded in immense volume, They clearly realized they were highly uncomfortably at the total mercy of incredibly highly volatile, deeply dangerous pricing. To deeply protect their highly rapidly expanding, highly vulnerable wealth, they brilliantly decided they absolutely needed to immediately stop playing by other people's highly restrictive rules and aggressively start writing their very own rules. They rapidly opened a massive, highly intimidating branch office located in New York City. Following the incredible devastation and severe economic destruction of the American Civil War, they permanently relocated their massive corporate headquarters to the island of Manhattan entirely. And in the historic year of 1870, they brilliantly executed a highly massive, deeply strategic maneuver that permanently, irreversibly altered the entire global economy. They literally, physically, helped found the immensely powerful New York Cotton Exchange. They completely and utterly institutionalized the very highly valuable commodity they were aggressively trading, effectively creating the rigid, highly regulated framework for all massive global futures trading and completely cementing themselves at the absolute, undeniable center of vast international commerce. The absolute ultimate, incredibly powerful graduation for any massive, highly ambitious billionaire dynasty is the highly complex transition from simply moving physical goods to efficiently moving highly invisible, completely infinite capital. The brilliant Lehman Brothers aggressively, successfully morphed from highly wealthy Southern cotton brokers directly into incredibly elite, highly powerful Wall Street merchant bankers. They successfully utilized the immense, incredibly staggering capital generated directly from the deep dirt of Alabama to fully underwrite the absolute foundational infrastructure of the modern United States of America. They powerfully financed the massive, incredibly expensive expansion of the highly vital transcontinental railroads. They brilliantly underwrote the massive initial public offerings for the absolute, incredibly massive titans of the 20th century, specifically including massive corporations like Sears, Roebuck and Company, F.W. Woolworth, R.H. Macy and Company, and the massive Studebaker Corporation. They successfully built an absolute, incredibly dominant investment banking leviathan that would eventually incredibly employ over highly staggering 25,000 people globally worldwide and successfully manage hundreds of massive billions of dollars in highly valuable assets. When the modern, highly uninformed public quickly hears the incredibly famous name Lehman Brothers, their minds instantly, highly reactively flash directly to the highly catastrophic, incredibly destructive 2008 global financial crisis. They quickly picture deeply devastated, highly stressed men in very expensive tailored suits, sadly carrying simple cardboard boxes directly out of massive, towering glass skyscrapers in downtown Manhattan, powerfully signaling the absolute largest, incredibly devastating corporate bankruptcy in global economic history. But that is merely the deeply tragic ending, absolutely not the incredible empire. What the general people completely, fundamentally, and entirely misunderstand is that one of the absolute most powerful, incredibly influential global financial institutions in the entire history of human capitalism was absolutely not born in the highly elite, deeply wealthy drawing rooms of New York, London, or Paris. It was incredibly built by three highly determined Jewish immigrants in a highly tiny, completely wooden storefront located in Montgomery, Alabama, who brilliantly figured out exactly how to completely solve the massive, crippling liquidity crisis of the entire global cotton supply chain. They absolutely did not just simply participate in the growing American economy. They entirely underwrote its very incredibly massive existence. They are absolutely the ultimate, completely undisputed, truly incredible titans of massive Southern wealth. They arrived with nothing, identified the massive inefficiencies of a frontier economy, and built institutional monopolies that outlasted wars, depressions, and retail apocalypses. Which of these empires shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments. If you want to understand who really runs the world, like and subscribe to Global Status. We track the money.